What's good, YouTube? We got a video from my goats, Dr. Wardy, man. He actually just recently hopped into a live stream. By the time this video was recorded, what is it, December 7th? Yesterday, December 6th, he was in the live, and he was like, how do you have the stamina to do a 9-hour live stream? I don't know, I just get it done. Shout out to you, man. You've been making great content, and I love to see it. As you can see, we have the bell turned on, so I don't miss a video like these. If you want to be the same, you can sub to me, turn on your bell, and I will find content like this, and I'll bring it to you, and we get to enjoy it together as a whole. You know, 'tis the season. Hope you guys are staying warm. Happy holidays. I'm kind of losing my voice, but still pumping out content, and I still want to give you guys, what you're looking for. As always, check the Discord community linked down below. That way, if you join that, you'll be notified every time I post on YouTube, every time we go live on Twitch, and you get announcements, alerts, and other things like the fact that sometimes these are streamed on TikTok. You get the insider scoop. But without further ado, let's just get straight into it.
If you'd ask Ben Tennyson, the Omnitrix is, as he puts it, the most powerful weapon in the universe. On the other hand, Azimuth, the creator of the Omnitrix, is very clear in saying he didn't create a weapon. Instead, he created the ultimate device for understanding all the beings in the universe.
Because that was his intentions, yeah.
His later interpretation of the device with the whole "I am one of everyone" bit. However you spin it, however it's wielded by whoever's got it on their wrist,
the cannonball, however you spin it. Perfect. I like that.
Having quite a lot of malfunctions, issues, failures, whatever you want to call them. So I thought it was about time we catalogue each one of those failures in one reasonably tight video. As per usual, we'll be following my standard approach of covering things mostly in order, starting with the classic series, then Alien Force through Ultimate Alien, and wrapping things up with Omniverse, with a sprinkling of tangents and asides here and there. So getting started with it, we'll do a very brief overview on what the Omnitrix is, and what I mean by failure before we get too far into things. For those of you more interested in the general workings of the Omnitrix, I'll leave a link to my definitive Every Omnitrix Explained video in the description. As simply as I can possibly put it, the Omnitrix is a device that allows its wearer to transform into whatever alien species they'd like, provided the species DNA is in its database, and considering there's a million odd DNA samples there are quite a lot to choose from. As far as safeguards and all that, the Omnitrix does have quite a few. There's most famously the timeout feature that forcibly reverts Ben or whoever's wearing it back to their original form, apparently to prevent any harm from happening to their original DNA or circumvent any complications with any particular alien forms. Though it seems a bit strange given we see a future Ben who spends most every waking moment not reverting back to his human form, and he seems pretty...
And that was an interesting thing. I've seen a lot of theories about whether the Omnitrix... I personally believe that when Ben turns to a human, he's using the Omnitrix. Yes, it's probably saving the data of like how his genetics are, but I don't think it's saving his genetics in a sense of like it's the reason he goes back to the exact form. I think it's like that's already woven into his DNA, which is why his transformations are different than every other people from his race, even though it's similar, right? To like the peak, it's the peak of whatever race he's transforming into. I would argue that that peak is there for him because every future Ben we see is jacked. He has intelligence, like good thought, good battle IQ, the things he learns from his job. But also, seeing the film theorist theory like so long ago, I truly believe it's turning him to like the peak of human, despite his flaws as Ben. And I think a good example of that is Albedo being a human and it turned him into Ben. I think that's the cool full circle of it. But yeah, the Omnitrix is amazing.
Well off, even if his headspace wasn't all that great when we're first introduced to him. Then there's a feature that prevents the device from being forcibly removed, with the Omnitrix out
self-destruct feature too,
putting these surges of energy that are pretty effective even against the biggest, baddest villains in the series. There's also quite famously the self-destruct sequence, which we see a couple of times in the series. First in the classic series film, then later again at the end of Alien Force. This started with the Omnitrix building up energy to a certain point. Given enough time, it's enough to destroy the universe. Which isn't...
And people were talking about Azimuth and saying like, yo, what the fuck? Why did you allow this thing to exist? This thing could blow up the entire universe. That was an unnecessary feature. But think about it. He created this to preserve the DNA of a bunch of species, even if they've gone extinct. So knowing that to be the case, not only is this the craziest weapon of all time, it is the only thing that can preserve all life if something very catastrophic were to happen. So in thinking into the future wise, if this device is destroyed or not used for that purpose, the universe is doomed. Almost. It's like it's a device of hope and peace. So it's like it having that feature is a little like, you can give them a little side eye, but in theory, given enough time without this device, the universe is fucked. So it's a symbolic like nuclear deterrent to go like, yo, you doing this is gonna fuck the universe. So if you tamper with my device, it's gonna blow the fuck up and the entire universe is cooked. But we know there's, beings outside of reality in Ben 10. So I'm sure things would be fine.
So cohesive with the idea that it's designed for peaceful cohabitation, but there's something about Azimuth being willing to destroy the universe if it meant preventing
I knew he was going to talk about it
from being in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
Then there's the most common safeguard, being the Omnitrix always giving Ben the right alien for any
matter what
situation, which may very well explain away one of the more major failures shortly, but certainly more so feels like it
especially it's despite like if he thinks it's the right alien or not.
Comes to full effect in Ben 10 Omniverse, where Ben is very much given the right alien when it really came down to the series finale.
The GOAT.
Getting into the failures proper, and one I'm sure most everyone will be familiar with coming into this video, we have the many mistransformations of the series, where for a number of reasons, sometimes
earlier on too,
especially in OG, Ben gets the wrong alien. Very oftentimes, especially classic series Ben, wanting someone like Forearms who can hit whatever the problem is very hard, and getting someone like Grey Matter who has to take a very different kind of approach. This resulting in all sorts of
it did make him a better hero.
Stressful situations like using ripjaws far from any bodies of water, or in most cases, Ben having to use aliens in all sorts of more creative ways, rather than just hitting things really hard. This being explained away later on in the series by Azimuth, who chalks up to user error, saying Ben's being too rough with the Omnitrix when slamming the device each time he transforms, leading to all these mistransformations. Which certainly is a fun way to address it, but doesn't always feel like it really lines
up. Doesn't always make sense.
Oh,
let me get this thumbnail.
When slamming the device each time he transforms, leading to all these mistransformations. Which certainly is a fun way to address it, but doesn't always feel like it really lines up. Piggybacking off of that for a moment, we also have all the times the device times out quicker than it should, or Ben was transformed for longer than he really should.
Too long, yeah.
Like with the time Ben was stuck as Grey Matter for the better part of an episode. Though again, you could very much argue that's the Omnitrix keeping Ben safe. A similar thing goes for when the Omnitrix is timed out, only to at the drop of a hat, be ready to go right the last second when Ben needs that transformation most. The Omnitrix recharging instantly and Ben immediately getting cannonballed seemingly out of nowhere when he's about to get minced by Kevin comes to mind. And again,
because it's like, we don't know how this scientific like peak of a device truly like thinks and does things.
And feels very much like the result of that failsafe. And again, it does feel like this is very likely the reason that he is mistransforming in the first place, that the Omnitrix is choosing to give him cannonball in this situation. Now, if this were an iceberg style video, this would be where we start to get into that medium/lower levels, with all the ways external factors can mess about with the Omnitrix functioning as intended. Jumping ahead a bit here, in Omniverse, we see the Omnitrix be influenced by whatever the villain Phil was emitting. Phil being a half tarantula human hybrid. Off of electrical alien.
And it's supposed to be like the same like species as Kevin or something. Kevin's like species and his powers are constantly retconned.
And for whatever reason, being around him during the episode Max's
Asmosians, something like that. I don't know.
To transform into any
a lot of
electrical aliens. Very much being an ideal situation for Phil, except for feedback, of course. Actually, in a very similar way, we have the episode
Wrath,
where whatever electromagnetic adjacent field the little Tiff was putting out,
what the fuck?
Wrath and keeping Ben. Whatever electromagnetic adjacent field.
Oh, that nigga tough. That was a good counter, King.
I got right to the end of work on this video and almost forgot to mention, the Omnitrix is very much vulnerable to being messed around with by Ben using a screwdriver. You could absolutely
for whatever reason, bro.
Here, Ben actively trying to hack the Omnitrix, with him knocking off the faceplate.
It did help him in the future, creating like his other versions of it, like the Biomatrix. I think that's what it's called, the one that confused. That was a cool concept to me.
Series villain Dr. Animo even taking this chance to use the faceplate to create fusions of aliens and animals, like we see with the
Oh, that's crazy.
Again, jumping
that's
around
fire.
a bit, that just reminded me. Speaking of outside damage and the first use of the DNA acquisition sequence, we have the time the Leboan,
Blitzwolfer,
seen at the time the Yenaldushi, scratching the Omnitrix's faceplate, adding the Leboan as a transformation into the Omnitrix, but doing so at a slow, unconventional way that mirrored Ben slowly transforming into a werewolf over time.
Yeah, than what it normally does.
It was due to the Omnitrix getting the DNA while also receiving a bit of damage. The episode would likely play out very differently had the failsafe protecting the Omnitrix gone off, preventing the scratch and hitting Leboan with an energy wave. Then there's the Omnitrix's clear vulnerability to all sorts of magic, the most notable example being everything surrounding the Destroy All Aliens film, where Gwen's magic incidentally hit Ben as upgrade. Then, following the recalibration in Alien Force, magic didn't really seem to be much of a factor. And speaking of, following the jump from Classic to Alien Force,
Good
we have a
lord.
few new issues
Hybrid
and
slapped the
malfunctions popping up after
schnitzel
recalibrating.
out of him.
Especially as we see aliens like Chromostone and later Terraspin have no issue with absorbing or nullifying magic, and we even have Gwen able to cast spells on the Ultimatrix and later enter the device alongside Ben and use all her antidote abilities without causing any harm or issue. But again, that's the Ultimatrix, and that could be its own video itself.
Yeah.
And speaking of, following the jump from Classic to Alien Force, we have a few new issues and malfunctions popping up. To quote Derek J. Wyatt, in regards
Talk
to
to
some
me.
technical issues with the recalibrated Omnitrix, as well as the Ultimatrix, when asked about the somewhat limited positioning of the Omnitrix on each alien form after the Classic series, Derek saying, this actually caused interference with transformations such as power glitches that would cause random flight and abilities not the alien species Ben changed into, as well as leaving all the aliens naked and cold. Now,
Got it.
even though it's a direct quote, I don't know how concrete that information really is. It's certainly a crew statement, but to the best of my knowledge, we never see random abilities that aren't consistent with. It's certainly a crew statement, but to the
Literally soft as Charmin, but it looks like ice cream.
best of my knowledge, we never see random abilities that aren't consistent with later appearances of aliens all too often, if at all. Though I could very well be wrong there. I do know we get a lot of one-off powers, but it doesn't.
Excellent balanced meal, bro. Chicken, greens, some type of like potatoes or some type of carbs or some mac.
Doesn't really seem like they're not native to the species. On the random glitches come Alien Force onwards, we do certainly have the lack of clothing that was so prevalent in Alien Force that was sorted come Omniverse. That is for everyone other than Wrath, but even then, he does end up getting an outfit of his own after Ben realizes he's been running about the place naked. Back to what can very well be blamed on user error, there's the time Ben convinced Kevin to give him a hand in essentially jailbreaking Omnitrix, trying to force master control, resulting in an explosion that would mutate Kevin for the rest of the duration of Alien Force and beyond that, releasing a bunch of aliens from the device in physical, mindless form, running about the place entirely operating off instinct until Ben could use the DNA acquisition sequence to get them right back in there. And on top of that, had the DNA samples not been in the Omnitrix again, they would have fallen apart into nothing in 24 hours' time. So definitely down to user error, but it does seem like a strange glitch error, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if you'd call this next one a glitch, but it's certainly an example of not being the norm. We do have the time the Omnitrix created a hybrid of a human and an alien in the form of nanomech during the live-action Ben 10 Alien film. This being especially odd, seeing the Omnitrix is fully capable of scanning corrupt or unusual DNA like a DNA,
perfectly fine,
amalgam Kevin, but doesn't as a way of safeguarding itself from corrupted or damaged DNA. On that, I failed to mention earlier, it's not really hugely relevant to glitches, errors, all that, but the Omnitrix does have the ability to repair DNA like we see Ben do with the hybrid. Which leads me to the question, why didn't the Omnitrix repair an amalgam Kevin, alternate Agagor, or actually really any of Kevin's amalgam forms at all, really? Surely they'd be seen as corrupted or damaged, at least by the Omnitrix. Moving on from that, by the time we get to Omniverse, we don't really seem to be introduced to any new issues beyond what we've seen in previous series, which makes sense given this is a completed Omnitrix. You would reasonably assume it would be the least flawed of the bunch, but back to Magic just for a moment, I don't know if you really want to call this an honorable mention or whatever. There's the one time in Omniverse where after one magical golem bites the Omnitrix, from there on, Ben only has access to Ghost Freak on the Omnitrix's dial.
This is insane, bro.
Exactly why that would be. I know it's a scare maker.
It was so interesting, like plot-wise, some of the choices they went down.
This is Omniverse debut in the last second.
Some of the roads they went down.
But I couldn't quite connect the dots here. Maybe this golem came into contact with the scare is probably the best I've got. Just to rattle off a set of largely inconsequential ones, before we wrap things up, I don't know if you'd exactly call it an error, but whenever Ben's sick, like in the
aliens are like
series episode,
strange,
or the less consequential cold he gets in Alien Force, his aliens are also affected by that sickness. Wildmart not being able to use his radar vision, Forearms getting hives, and more famously, Heat Blast swapping out his abilities for cold ones. There's also the many examples of alien DNA. I don't want to be...
Heat Blast is the best, like, debuff, bro.
As dramatic, say, corrupting the user, but certainly influencing them. Like with Wrath, Vampire, or whoever, you'd think the Omnitrix would have something to safeguard the user's mental state. And taking a step back from individual examples and jumping all over the place, from an audience standpoint, or even really a showrunner's perspective, I'd imagine, these errors add a very prominent element to the show that in one way or another make the series much more interesting, forcing Ben to adapt to any given situation or give us fun one-off episodes, with Ben slowly transforming over the runtime of an episode, or Ben and the others having to track down transformations.
And that's why they're there.
I personally think nearly every failure leads to, if nothing else, interesting stories.
The more interesting,
If you made it this far into the video and aren't subscribed, please consider doing so. Either way.
He's not an outro god. I might have cooked me. I might have immediately went to the next video. Shout out Dr. Wardy, bro. I'm loving the love that he's been like receiving with his content. Anybody watching this, make sure you go check out his video and, you know what I'm saying, like it, man. And yeah, comment down below your favorite Ben 10 alien. And yeah, stay healthy healthy. Being helpful is quite useful. Stay healthy, hydrated, happy. That's why I said healthy. Stay happy, healthy, and hydrated. As always, time to see me next. Peace.